The MCU is failing. Everybody I speak to, plus the countless other video essays and comments on the internet, all acknowledge that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is nowhere near living up to the hype that it once created. I mean, it's been that way for a while, but I think it's become clear what Marvel's problem actually is. A lot of other people have theorized that it's due to quantity over quality, a lack of direction, and just straight up bad luck. And while that's partially true, it doesn't address the real issues. What is it about the quality of these films that's dropping? What about the directions that it is going? And yes, there's bad luck, but sometimes they could have adapted better. And that's what I'm here to talk about. Quantity over quality is the most discussed issue at the moment when it comes to the MCU. The argument goes that the company is putting out so much content that when you do, the quality of it tends to drop a little bit. And if we're being honest, the average quality has dropped across the range of Disney Plus shows and movies that have come out, but the issue of more content isn't really the issue. I mean, generally speaking, more content is a good thing, but why has the quality dropped? The answer is because in this post-Endgame era, Marvel Studios has had to make both their movies and TV shows look exciting for an audience who is ready to tap out after Avengers Endgame. It means they've prioritized spectacle over character. Let's start with the most recent film, Captain America: Brave New World. Now, to be honest, this movie is fine. It genuinely has some great action sequences and it's got a decent enough story, but the reason this movie isn't getting much love is because by the end of it, nobody cares. That sounds harsh, but it's true, and hear me out. As an MCU fan, I was excited to see what Anthony Mackie would bring to the table as the new Captain America. And in Brave New World, he delivers. He stands his ground as the new Cap, and facing off against Red Hulk establishes him as a good hero who can hold his own. The issue though? Of all the characters in this movie, he doesn't get a character arc. At the start of the film, he's working for the government as Captain America, enjoying his work training Torres and helping out Isaiah Bradley. And by the end of the movie, he's actually in the exact same spot. The only thing he struggles with is whether he is worthy of taking up the mantle of Captain America, which is the exact same issue he had in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The other characters have better arcs. Torres becoming willing to learn and letting go of all his cockiness, and Ross dealing with his past actions and his relationship with Betty. But by the end of a Captain America movie, the fact that Captain America hasn't had any growth is disappointing. Now, to be honest, we could have guessed this from the trailer, because the trailer prioritizes spectacle over character. The main draw for this movie was the showdown between Captain America and Red Hulk. Unfortunately, general audiences don't really care enough about Sam Wilson to go see this movie, so Marvel had to market a big villain to get them to come to theaters. Part of the reason general audiences don't care about Sam Wilson is because it has been too long since we've seen him. In the real world, it's been almost 4 years since we've last seen Sam Wilson. 6 years if you're someone who doesn't watch the Disney Plus shows. Compare that with Steve Rogers, and from his first appearance until his last, he appeared every single year. This criteria of spectacle over character can be applied to many of the other MCU movies as well. Every great MCU movie has amazing character growth as well as spectacle. Iron Man has two men fighting in technologically advanced metal suits, but at its core is about Tony Stark learning what guilt and accountability look like. Captain America: The Winter Soldier has 3 SHIELD helicarriers shooting each other out of the sky, Hydra coming out of the shadows, but at its core is about Steve Rogers helping his best friend and finding his place in a new time. Looking at recent movies, and Guardians of the Galaxy 3 has... well, you know what? Guardians 3 actually marketed itself on character. From the trailers we knew it was going to focus on the team and their journeys, and that's why people went and saw it. And thankfully that movie delivered above and beyond in terms of character, and that's why people loved it. Where MCU movies fail is somewhere like Thor 2, where at the end of it, Thor is once again at the same place he was emotionally at the start of his movie. Frustrated by Odin, longing for Jane, and wanting to be king. Or Multiverse of Madness, which had great spectacle, but the character growth was almost non-existent. If anything, Doctor Strange's character arc made him worse. And of course, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which failed because, once again, there was no real growth for Scott or Hope. The only major character arc was Cassie, who came across as a bit more of a jerk to her father, and grew to see that he was just trying to care for her and make up for lost time. But this is something he's always been trying to do, so even in her journey, there's repetition, and it gets boring. Plus, Quantumania really wasted their villain, so there's no arc for him either, which sucks. This criteria can also be applied to the Disney Plus shows. Loki has one of the best character arcs in the MCU, and that statement can be applied to both Lokis. The original one who died in Infinity War, and the variant one from Avengers Endgame. Both have amazing character arcs, and so people love him and they love his show. WandaVision had interesting character arcs bolstered by fantastic spectacle, even though it may not have stuck the landing. She-Hulk, Ms. Marvel and Moon Knight all have good things going for it, but they end up culminating in big CGI battles or things trying to be spectacle, but it's not really that exciting. As I was writing this essay, this video by John Patterson came out, which elaborates even more on the importance of character in the MCU. He goes a lot more in depth and I highly recommend checking out that video. But now we come to possibly the two biggest MCU movies post-Endgame, Spider-Man No Way Home and Deadpool and Wolverine. Public opinion on these movies has changed since they were first released, and for good reason. But in the spectacle over character debate, these movies do something unique, and it's the reason why they're the ones that are held in high esteem. Spider-Man No Way Home was a cultural phenomenon on an Avengers level scale. On opening night, a shockwave was sent around the world. This movie was everything you wanted it to be, and more. And don't get me wrong, this movie is still amazing, but on rewatch, it just doesn't feel the same. The reason for this is because the spectacle part of the movie just doesn't work as well. The movie officially marketed itself on character, with a healthy dose of spectacle to draw audiences in. Tom Holland's Spider-Man was already popular, his previous movies had done well, and this would deal with the repercussions of his identity coming out to the world and the consequences he would face because of that. The spectacle, of course, came from the returning villains from Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's respective Spider-Man movies. The questions ran rampant. Will Andrew and Tobey show up? Will there be other cameos? So on opening night, when those characters came in, that was a game changer. Not only was it nostalgic, but it was exciting for the story possibilities, as well as finally moving the direction of the MCU towards the multiverse in a big way. But there's a reason it doesn't work as well on rewatch, as opposed to something like Infinity War or Endgame. The spectacle in this movie is based on nostalgia, which is great, but when that nostalgia is induced by characters walking into a room, it loses a bit of its touch. But while No Way Home loses the impact of its spectacle on rewatch, it's still a good movie, because at its core, it's about Peter Parker. We're so emotionally invested in this Peter Parker's journey, and even if you'd never seen any Spider-Man films before, you could still get emotionally invested in this one. Deadpool and Wolverine does something similar. Its spectacle is based on nostalgia for the Fox superheroes, and the novelty of seeing Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds share the screen as iconic characters. But at its core, this movie is about the journey that Deadpool and especially Logan have to be better heroes for the people they have loved and lost. It's about character. And this is one of the main reasons why the MCU is failing. Only some projects are driven by character. Marketing, execution, and other factors all come into play, but this is the core issue, especially when it comes to the films. They are the ones that draw the biggest audiences. So if people are spending their money to watch an MCU movie, it has to be amazing. The MCU is held to a higher standard than other franchises because it's got a track record of great movies. So even when an MCU project is good, it still gets slandered because it doesn't live up to its brilliant predecessors. Especially when not only the movie, but even post-credit scenes and teasers for the future are mediocre at best. Which brings me to my next point. The spectacle and character debate is the reason MCU movies don't do well on their own. But the reason for why people are becoming disinterested in the MCU as a whole? Some people would say that it's a lack of direction as to where the MCU is heading. Whereas I say almost the opposite. There's actually too many directions. The Infinity Saga's post-credit scenes almost always led to something that was coming soon. They were generally resolved within a year or two. While there are a few exceptions to this, there have been way more post-credit scenes in phases 4 and 5 that have not gone anywhere. The amount of different storylines that the MCU is juggling at the moment is just too much for the casual moviegoer. I saw a theory over on Reddit that suggested that phases 4 and 5 be split in two. One half about the street level projects and one half about the multiverse. And this is a great theory. It splits up projects into clear lines as to where each is heading and its relevance to the overall story. There's just one problem. It was made by a fan. This approach should have been implemented by Marvel Studios, not by a fan making a theory to make sense of the jumbled mess the MCU has become. The Infinity Saga all worked towards one goal. It was all part of the same story. Every project had relevance. In trying to please everyone, the MCU has pleased less and less people every time. Phases 4, 5, and 6 are being billed as the multiverse saga. So why does it feel like we've barely touched the multiverse? Looking at it on paper, there have been 27 MCU projects in phases 4 and 5, and only 7 of those have dealt with the multiverse in some way. In contrast, there were 18 MCU films before Infinity War, and 7 of those included Infinity Stones. While it's roughly the same amount of projects, the Infinity Saga had a lot less to follow. And even then, the storyline followed a linear progression. Each project led to the next. But now, even as a diehard fan, I still have trouble working out the timeline for some of these recent projects. The multiverse is supposed to be an exciting concept, and it is. But when your universes become more and more disconnected, when even the singular universe you've created doesn't work in a cohesive narrative, the idea of a multiverse becomes less and less appealing. If you give a person too much choice, chances are they won't choose anything. With so many different projects and storylines, this makes general audiences less interested in the MCU. The biggest films in the Infinity Saga were the Avengers. These were iconic box office hits that told a phenomenal story about a group of heroes overcoming adversity together. The first was about a team of remarkable people coming together to fight an impossible battle. The second was about how the team operates in their prime and the clashes of beliefs and ideology that occur. The third was about the team losing because they were apart, and the fourth was about how they win together. Okay, now maybe that's an oversimplification, but when Kevin Feige said that they were only going to use the Avengers films to wrap up a saga, I saw that as one of the worst mistakes Marvel Studios could possibly make. The Avengers is the biggest selling point of the MCU, and to basically sideline your flagship team for a couple of years is a huge error. Instead, we could have gotten to see once again how a new team comes together, fights together, and despite their differences, will come out on top. This would have made us care more for the characters because we would have seen them deal with struggles from both inside and outside a team. We would have more of a cohesive narrative, as post-credit scenes and films would have led directly into an Avengers movie, as opposed to leading to a project that may or may not ever exist. And we would have had a team. Obviously there are so many heroes to keep track of now, but at least we would have known who the most important people are. Back in the day, it was clearly Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor. Now, I genuinely have no idea. I would have said Sam Wilson's Captain America, but given they took 6 years to give him a movie after his last movie appearance, I doubt that. Of course, we're coming up to an Avengers movie next year with Avengers Doomsday, but honestly, why should we care? We don't even know who the Avengers are going to be. Marvel Studios has had a ton of bad luck in recent years. The passing of Chadwick Boseman, the potential loss of the rights to Spider-Man, and of course the Jonathan Majors controversy. All of these have had a major impact on the MCU and its potential storylines. Because of these things, the MCU has had to shift things around to get their feet off the ground. So while yes, it is bad luck for them, I argue that it's just a matter of circumstance, because in most cases, they've actually done the best they could. A lot of it was out of their control and nothing could have prevented or saved the things that went wrong. But even though it's not their fault, this isn't enough for MCU fans or the average moviegoer. And let's have a look at why. The passing of Chadwick Boseman was tragic, and there was debate around how to go forward with the character of T'Challa and the Black Panther. And I'd argue that they did pretty well. Having him pass away in-universe allowed respect to be paid to a phenomenal actor, and it enabled Shuri to take up the mantle naturally. Looking at Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Marvel actually did okay here. However, considering how much of a cultural impact Black Panther was, and the iconicity that Chadwick Boseman had, there's simply no way to reclaim that. So in the mind of audiences, Shuri falls short, but it's actually not her fault. Moving on, and at one point, the Spider-Man deal Marvel had with Sony fell through. But thanks to a drunken phone call from Tom Holland and some negotiating with Kevin Feige, they were able to reach an agreement that resulted in Spider-Man No Way Home. This is an example of making the best of a bad situation. However, when it comes to Kang and Jonathan Majors, this is potentially the biggest misstep they could have made. In 2023, Jonathan Majors was accused and convicted of assaulting his girlfriend. Marvel Studios wasn't sure how things were going to turn out for him, so they had a choice. Either recast Kang, or pivot to something else. And we all know what happened next. Robert Downey Jr. was confirmed to be returning to the MCU as Doctor Doom in the next Avengers movie, replacing Kang as the big bad. And while that was a bit exciting, it has reset the MCU once again. While the idea was probably to get people excited to jump back into the MCU, I think it's actually had the opposite effect. Having built up Kang as a major villain in Loki and Ant-Man, people were excited. Marvel should have just bitten the bullet and recast Kang so they could continue with their original plan. Now that that's not happening and the Kang storyline seems wrapped up, even more people are tapping out. They're not invested in the main storyline anymore, so they stop watching. Even the projects that touched on Kang and the multiverse, they now seem irrelevant. Which leaves us with the question, where do they go from here? The answer is a complicated one. We need to acknowledge that there's simply no way to recapture the lightning in the bottle that was the Infinity Saga. It's just not possible. However, they can make the MCU great again. While I doubt any movie will ever reach the heights of Avengers Endgame, I think Marvel Studios can adapt their universe post-Secret Wars. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any way to save it before then. Everything's already in motion. With rumours of a soft reboot coming after Avengers Secret Wars and the Russo brothers calling it a new beginning, the only ways for Marvel to shine the way it once did is to make their projects about character. To have one central storyline that we can follow throughout all the movies and shows. And of course, bring back the Avengers. I don't mean bring back Tony Stark. I don't mean bring back Steve Rogers. I mean bring together a group of remarkable people that we can follow and get behind. It sounds simple enough, but as you can see over the last few years, Marvel has struggled. At this point, we can only really hope that Avengers, Doomsday and Secret Wars do really well, and that people are excited after these movies. People are looking forward to what comes next, and Marvel learns from their mistakes and can make the franchise name stand strong once again.